Assalamualaikum and welcome to your new lecture that's going to be on localization industry. We are going to discuss we are going to be discussing the role of localization industry and its key components in regards to the translation industry or simply translation. First of all, a brief review. In this subject or course, we have discussed machine translation. Alright, we have discussed the key aspects of machine translation in detail. Then we have moved on to human translation and we discussed human translation in a bit detail. Now, after the comparison and all of that, we are going to move on to localization. When you say localization, the first thing you need to understand is it is mostly being done for websites right now, but it is a very old industry. Localization is Localization is the process of making something local in character or restricting it to a particular place. Okay, you can understand it best against the concept of globalization. Okay, globalization is when you try to make something global and available to all of the world, but in its original form as it was produced. It is available as it is. Localization is the opposite of that. That is when you try to make something available to all of the people, but not as it is, but it is tailored to the needs of those people, the special needs of those people, because everyone has a different culture and a different language. So the sentence goes the tug of war between the forces of globalization and localization. That is just to help you understand that these are opposite terms or opposite concepts. The second is that localization is the adaptation of a product or service to meet the needs of a particular language, culture, or desired population's look or feel. Because you see, sometimes we have got some content and we don't like that content because that is against our cultural aspirations or linguistic aspirations. So localization caters to all those problems. All right. It is simply defined as the linguistic and cultural adaptation of digital content, because right now in this era, when you say localization, it means you are going to make websites or online products or things that are available online, like apps, games, and other stuff like this, available to the people of a certain locale. Okay, adaptation of digital content to the requirements of a locale of a foreign market, and the provision of services and technologies for the management of multilingualism across the digital global information flow. Okay, the including related services and technologies. This definition is technically going beyond that is provided in literature, because this is right now an advanced term and it caters to a very specific domain. Although in literature you would also see localization, especially if you go towards the theory of translation. Okay, you would see there are two types of translations being provided. Okay, one that gives your reader the content as it is, the foreign content, and one that would change the foreign content to suit the culture and the linguistic expressions of the reader. Um, so this is the question right here for you. You need to find out the exact names of those two types of translations and who is offering those two types of translation. The week after this lecture, I would ask you this question in class, and I hope everyone will have a clear idea of those two types of translations, because you have studied the translation theory in detail in your previous coursework. Okay, what do we need to consider when localizing? Now coming back to the topic of localizing. In addition to the idiomatic language translation, there are many details that one needs to consider while localizing a product. That is number one, your time zones, because sometimes your time zones differ, and when you are localizing some particular thing, you need to worry about that, because a lot of your websites and a lot of your stuff has timestamps available on the product right now. Money. If you are localizing a website and an app or a game, there are in-app, in-game, or on-website purchases available. So let's say that website was previously available in Europe, so the currency would probably be euro or dollar. Um, this website is now available in Pakistan, so you need to make sure that if a Pakistani is opening the website here, the price listing that was previously in euro or in dollar automatically switches to Pakistani rupees. Okay, national holidays, because sometimes you are offering some special discount, some special sale, or anything. You can offer anything. These things are mostly offered on national holidays, so you need to consider national holidays when localizing a product. Then there is the local color sensitivities. Like for some regions, red would be a warning, okay? But if you go to China, red is very auspicious there. So if you use red in the region where it is considered a warning and you are trying to sell a product, it is highly likely that there would be less people buying it, or less people even considering buying it, because it has that warning color red. If you take the same if you take the same product and go to China, there would be more people buying it, probably because red is an auspicious color there. Okay, the product name or service name. This is very important. And I hope you all know that, because recently we saw those Black Lives Matters march, and after that you see a lot of products they changed their names. Especially you see for Pakistan there was Fair and Lovely, and it just got switched to Glow and Lovely or something of the sort, because of that whole thing that is going on in the international arena. So your product or service name, especially in translation, it matters, because sometimes you are translating for a particular culture, and that particular word or any word, because we do have some words which are not considered nice, or which you will not speak openly. So you cannot have such terms, such words in your as your product name. So you need to consider that as well when localizing a product. Gender roles are also very important, because that comes under your culture and your geographical references. Okay, let's consider in let's go towards Arab, the desert areas of Arab. All right, they would have a positive meaning for cold, and they would have a negative meaning for hot, because it's very hot there, and they like it is very rare to have cold or rain or something like that. So they would have a positive connotation for that and a negative connotation for hot. Okay, but if you go towards the areas or the countries which are cold throughout the year, and they see the sun very rarely, so they would have a positive connotation for the heat and the hot, or the word sun, and they would have possibly have a negative connotation or a negative meaning for the word cold or rain or a storm or things like that. I think storm, everyone has a negative connotation for that. But there are heat storms in Arab, and you would go towards the other countries, and there would be either cold, or there would be hail or something like that involved. So there are geographical references. If those are present in your product, you need to consider them as well when localizing it. A lot of it has to do with culture. Then another thing you need to consider very closely would be your religious aspects, the religious culture and the spiritual culture as well, the religious traditions and the spiritual traditions. because right now, as we are seeing, if you translate something that has a religious connotation to it for someone else, and you translate it wrong, um, then it could be considered very problematic. Okay, as we are seeing right now, people are very conscious of the religious and the spiritual traditions, even more so than the cultural traditions. So all of these things are what you need to focus on when localizing something. Now we are going to look at two proper definitions for localizing. So number one is the person here who's talking about localizing in terms as process by which digital content and product development in one locale defined in terms of geographical areas, language and culture are adopted for sale and use in another locale. Locale being another location, okay? So this process is not new. However, skills and the process and the standards have changed because of the changes of time. Because right now we are in the digital era. The second person here, let's see what he's talking about. It is seen as the means to level the playing field. Okay, and it redresses economic inequalities, helping to create a better world in which no one is left out. By allowing speakers of less common languages to enjoy access to the same products than those in the major markets use. However, these inequalities do persist because localizing does require a large budget. So sometimes for those who are minority speakers, they are also facing economic difficulties. So you would see a lot of problems when trying to localize a product. Okay. The most popular localizing industry right now is you can go to China because they convert everything into their own language. They have their own line, they have their own WhatsApp. Okay, that whole thing is like there is a new level of security there, and they have their own firewalls and they have their own systems. They have localized the whole thing, especially for China. And then you would see a lot of other things are there as well. Like I think they have their own website, search engine. There was one search engine, I keep forgetting its name. If I remember it through this recording, and I will tell you. But they have their own search engines, specially catered for the Chinese people. And you would see there are a lot of games and a lot of websites. They get localized into the Chinese language. They get transferred into the Chinese language according to how the Chinese would perceive it. It is apt according to their culture, because if it is not according to their culture, a lot of people would not be using it and your product will fail. Okay, that's it for this part. Then we move on to the process. So some common stages for the process of localization are analysis, preparation, translation, engineering and testing, and project review. We are going to look into the details of these one by one. So for process, localization teams handle projects in different ways depending on, for example, whether they work for a client or a service provider. Um, each project is different, and the way a project is handled is also different because of the needs of the project. Okay. Then there are also a large number of variables they depend on, such as the type of content, how soon is it going to get released, what is the size of it, who's going to access it, how accessible should it be, who are my target audience. There are a lot of aspects which come into play. Just like translation, when you translate, you have a purpose for translating, you have your audience, you look at their culture, you look at their linguistic needs. Okay, you look at your client and what your client wants, you look at the person who actually wrote it and what was he thinking about. There are a lot of aspects in the process of translation. Just like this, in localization there are a lot of aspects. Okay, now we will review them one by one. Number one is your analysis. Before the project kicks off, the content needs to be analyzed. Okay, you need to make sure your content is correct, and you need to make sure you understand your content properly, and all the people who are going to analyze it understand it, and they know what their client wants. Because unless you know what the client wants, you would probably make a wrong analysis, and if you make a wrong analysis, then your project is going to fail. So there are some important questions which need to be answered when following through the process of analysis. So what are these? These are: number one, is it possible to localize that? That is your number one question, because sometimes there is content that is untranslatable. You just cannot translate it, or you cannot manage to cover up. It would result in a very big translation, and you cannot manage to make it smaller and make it according to the needs of your audience. So you need to keep in mind your target audience, and then ask yourself, is it possible for you to do so? What is it going to take to be successful? How much material is not suitable? Okay, sometimes the whole of it is not suitable, that means that project is going to fail. Sometimes part of it is suitable, sometimes whole of it is suitable. If part of it is suitable, then there would be technically a part that is not suitable. So what would you do about it? Or would you ask your client who's asking you to, let's say, localize a game for you? Would you need it redeveloped? Would they need to ask their software engineers to work on it again and start from scratch? Okay, you need to assess that beforehand, because if you go unprepared into the project, then the liability lies on the localizer, people who are localizing that thing, and that's a big problem. You can lose your credibility, and in the translation industry, if you lose your credibility, that means you have lost all your things. Because connections are what matter here the most, especially if you are a freelancer, or if you are a new localizing or translating agency. Okay, how many features are supported in target language? If there are some features, because in games there are scenarios, maybe there is a scenario that is not according to your target language and your target language culture, you would definitely need to redevelop it. If you go with the same thing, it's probably, especially if it's a game for kids or a website for kids or an app for kids, when the adults are going to see it and they're going to perceive it inappropriate, kids are not going to use it, so your project will flop. You need to assess that also. Which tools and technologies would be needed to complete the project? If you have all of them available, if you don't have all of them available, how are you going to get them? All of that. Then is, after all that, you estimate how easy it's going to be, how difficult it's going to be, how much effort would be required. Okay, and if you're going to translate all of the thing, you do the word count, how many words are there, and then you have a technical support team. They're going to assess how much of effort are they going to put in, and then you're going to count, make a total estimate of the budget, whether it falls within the budget or whether your client would have to pay more or less. So the outcome at this particular stage of analysis would be a report, and you would present your report to your management and to your client. And afterwards, you would decide whether you would go through with the project or not based on the result of the report. Then is your preparation. Sorry for the spelling mistakes there. Then is your preparation. Okay, based on the outcome of the project analysis, and once a project has started, project managers, engineers, language leads, those are mostly linguists at this point, put together a plan, or rather a localizing kit. The plan right here would contain the tasks you are about to go through with, or the tasks you are going to have to perform. Your milestones, those are when you, let's say you have a big task, and you would have small milestones, like quarter of it is done, now half of it is done at this point, or if something happens here, you would have to go back to this, go back to the first milestone and start over again. You would describe the whole plan, the financial details of the whole plan, how much finances are you going to put into each milestone or each task, and it would be under review throughout the life cycle of the project, because maybe sometimes during the project sometimes one milestone would ask for a little more financial help, or you would need a little more money to complete that, and then they will have to take it out of that project and maybe from some other milestone which took out some less money, or maybe took some, you assumed that this was going to cost you this much and maybe it cost you less, so you would have to reassess that part, because you have to present the final report as well, like what you did, how you did, and where did it take you. Okay, then is your localization kit. So your localization kit is everything you need to successfully localize a project. These are your tools. Okay, these could be your translation tools, your technical tools, or anything of the sort. Then is your localization and translation guidelines. Okay, for translation you have certain set principles, but for localization, on top of translation you would have additional guidelines. Okay, um, because this is highly technical, so you need to take into account all the technical aspects of what you are doing. um, Technical means there is a lot of technology involved, okay, not just translators, because the result would be something you see on your screen, uh, maybe an app, a game, or a website. Then you have test scripts. Okay. Then you have a problem reporting mechanism. So problem reporting mechanism is like how you report a problem. Maybe you're facing a problem, but this is because of something that was done erroneous at the previous part. So you would have to refer back to the other person who did it. So there are technically templates. You fill it out. You write your name. You write the problem. You write like you're referring to this person to solve this problem, and you ask them to solve it by this time because you would have to complete this milestone at this time. And maybe if you have a suggestion on how to solve it, you will write it down, your contact details, and you would forward that to the person. That is a very simple form of problem reporting mechanism, but each company has their own. We will discuss. Then is your delivery instructions. How are you going to deliver it to your client? In what format do you need to deliver it to your client? In keeping in view this format, what do you need to worry about? That would be in your guidelines. And then you would have the contact details of all the people who are going to work on every step of the way. That is how you report the problem, because you have the content details, you have the details of what they are doing on every part, who's working on every part, and what is their part. So you would have all the details, and then you can refer back when there is a problem to that particular person. Okay, and this project plan and localization kit is made available to all the translators, engineers, the managers, everyone who's working on that particular project. When dealing with these matters, translators need to perform extremely technical and demanding administrative tasks, adopting from maintaining translation memories, analyzing free translation, matching fields, and checking consistency across product lines, uh, constant uh, updating of versions and computer platforms, and then they need to make sure about the visual localization environment, how it's going to appear on the screen, how long is it going to run, the timeline, and then they need to make sure all of these apart from the linguistic quality assurance. So here you would see a merger between your localization and translation, and translators working in this particular area need to be experts of both of these things, translation and localization. Only then would they be able to produce an accurate translation, and a translation that would result in a successful localized project. Let's let's move on to engineering and testing. if proper platforms are used and original analysis was good, then many problems can be reduced at the level of translation and then engineering and testing. However, layout and linguistic problems, they are always there and they are quite common. And they need to be, all you need to do is identify them and fix them before you move on to the release of the product. Okay. There are, however, some problems which impact on the core functionality of the digital product, and they need to be minimized um, as much as possible, because otherwise your product would fail the testing process and you would have to start all over again. Um, the people who work on this part, they are in the form of a panel, and there are a lot of people there who would test the product, test its quality, and make sure it would run on the system that client has asked you to. Okay, once localization engineers have assured the personnel who are working on tester and quality that all the problems are removed, and all significant problems you can say, because minute glitches are sometimes ignored, then this localized project is signed off by the quality assurance team, and then it is passed on to the release lab, from where it would be released to the customer. Before the final release, you would say there would be kind of like an internal launch or an internal release within the company, where the management would be there, the client would be there, and they would run through the whole project. Here, they would discuss everything, review everything. Both sides would review their progress, and they would discuss the strategies which they adopted to clear out all the hindrances that were present during the project, and they would agree upon if this project is going to last for some time in the future. They are going to agree upon the future prospects of the project. They are going to discuss the future implications of the strategies that were used during the localization of the project. And once the review is complete, then there would be final launch for the project. Okay, now let's go back to the main heading, that was localization in translation industry. What are the future prospects or the future directions for this industry? Right now, with the changing arena in all fields, localization process is also evolving and it is coming to the fore, especially when you see more and more people are turning towards the digital side of things. The whole word is, you can say, digitizing. There are now automated localization factories that are being developed to cope with the increased demand of localization, especially for website localization and app development. There are more localized versions of digital products which are simultaneously shipped with the original version. Previously, if you go back to the history, you would see the original version is launched, then maybe they have expanded and they want to expand to another area of the world, so they would need localization. But right now, what they're doing is something is launched and it is launched simultaneously throughout the world. So you would need localization done at the stage of redevelopment. So this would have its own problems and its own hindrances, because while development is taking place, there are other problems, and if you adjust localization along with development, it would lead to some serious amount of effort that is required. The process which we discussed was rather simple, and it was discussed simply because here in every example localization was being done after the project had been the original product, sorry, had been launched. If you launch them simultaneously, both teams need to be in sync with each other and they need to put in a whole lot of effort. Okay, right now in the world you would see there is kind of like a digital divide, because the countries who are highly developed, they would get access to the digital content quicker, and then you have the countries which are not so financially stable or economically stable, and there would be a digital divide there, and you would see the people there would not be able to access the content that is being provided to the rest of the world, and you would also see that the efforts of localization would be less in these countries because of budgeting troubles. Mm, Here, what is happening is you would see crowdsourcing also taking place here. Crowdsourcing platforms are coming to the fore in these economically troubled countries, and people would be working on that for low budgets. But the quality sometimes would not be same as that for high budgeted product launches. Okay. Then another thing you would see is previously it was coming under the head of translation, but right now it's developing its own, um it's not that much of something that is coming under the head of translation, but rather it has its own identity now, especially where the digital portion of translation is considered. And you would see that there are certified professional programs right now that are being offered in localization, just like there are certified translation programs or professional programs being offered in AVT, audio visual translation, because audio visual translation was previously a subpart of translation field as well, and it was less discussed, but right now it is beginning to gain its own distinct identity as well. So that was all about localization. Hope this is clear to everyone, and if it is still unclear, I do urge that you note down your questions and ask me, or you pull out some research paper or some article on localization and translation and try to go through that. There are a lot of websites on localization as well, and they would provide you some easy data about localization as well, so you can go through that as well. Okay.